There's a lot of things in this old world that just do not make sense. Like why there's so few believers on the firing line, while so many others sit the fence. But if you want to know where the Word of God stands, and believe it wants to use your feet and hands, it's time to take your faith out of the seats and into the streets, and come along with me. If you only look, then you will see on WCNTV.
Welcome again to WCNTV. Rob Hugh, your host, with you. And as usual, we want to start things off by just reminding you of our annual Ministry Expo and Conference that is put on by Wisconsin Christian News. It is March 13th and 14th in Marshfield, Wisconsin. We hold this in a public shopping mall, so we are able to reach the Christians who come for the conference, as well as just regular old everyday mall shoppers. So it's an excellent and unique venue. Folks come from all over the country for our conference. We've been doing it for about 18 years, and we have an excellent lineup for you this year, including we're going to kick things off on Friday night with Curtis Bowers, the producer of the Agenda documentaries, and we will be showing one of his films on Friday night. We have Dr. Mike Spalding, Jake MacAulay from the Institute on the Constitution, Usama Dakdock of the Straightway of Grace Ministries, Jamie Walden of Omega Dynamics, Lexi Hall from Created Equal, Coach Dave of Past the Salt Ministries, and David Arthur of I Belong Amen Ministries. We'll also have special guests, Leighton Howerton, who is a national recording artist, and the guy who wrote our theme song here on WCNTV. We'll have lots of exhibits by ministries and businesses, and tons of great resources, CDs, DVDs, tracks, books, you name it, and you can meet and greet your favorite Wisconsin Christian News authors. So that is March 13th and 14th in Marshfield, Wisconsin. Please get a hold of me if you need more information on that. You know, in our country today, there is a lot of confusion and a lot of ignorance and a lot of illiteracy, especially when it comes to our founding documents and God's Word. Our guest today is Jake MacAulay, one of our speakers for the conference. Jake is with the Institute for the Constitution. It's an educational outreach that presents the founder's biblical American view. His website is theamericanview.com, and it presents the American view on law and government. They've produced thousands of graduates. They have 5 different courses available that you can get online. Excellent for homeschool resources or Bible groups, Bible study groups, church studies. And that's all available at his website. Jake is also an ordained minister and a former syndicated talk show host who's spoken to audiences nationwide. He's established the American Club, a constitutional study group in public and private schools. And he's been seen on Yahoo News, Fox News, The Blaze, AP, CBS, NBC, The Weekly Standard, and he's also a monthly columnist with Wisconsin Christian News. So welcome, Jake. How are you doing?
Well, thank you very much, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope my tune is coming in loud and clear.
Sounds
I'm grateful for all the... Excellent.
So, Jake, maybe you could just quickly, before we get into the subject of the day, maybe just take us through some of the courses that you have available on on your website. And I know there's 5 different ones.
Yes, there is. As a matter of fact, if you go right now to www.instituteontheconstitution.com, you will see our United States Constitution course that's been around for a couple decades now. It's a 12-lecture course. It's accompanied with a 20-minute video lecture. So each lesson, there's 12 total, will start with a video lecture, and then we go through a workbook. I actually got one right here. Rob, you're showing one of the lessons that we have there. That is for free now. We are offering it free in digital form, and you can get that at instituteontheconstitution.com. We also have 5 courses total. So we have a state constitution course, the state of Maryland, which is where our headquarters is. We are working on a Virginia course and an Ohio course right now. We'd like to get all 50 states. We also have a sheriff and citizens constitution course. What is the constitutional duty of a sheriff, and how can sheriffs interpose between unconstitutional legislation or edicts or mandates of federal government that overstep the bounds of the Constitution? What should a sheriff do? And we believe in interposition, so we teach that. We also have a duty of the jury course, which is a fantastic course. Teaches you all you need to know to be an informed juror. You don't even have to get elected, but you can uphold the Constitution as a juror. And so that course is fantastic. Those are all courses that people generally take after taking our Constitution course, which again is free at instituteontheconstitution.com right now. We also have a one-day seminar, and it's about America's biblical foundations, and it's for pastors and elected officials. And the reason that we put this course together is because so many people are so busy nowadays, they don't want to go through 12 lectures, at least they think they don't. And so we pack them into a one-day seminar, 4 one-hour lessons, and we put a lunch in the middle of it. You can break down however you like, but those are the courses that we have available. And we'd be happy for you to click on any of the links or go to any of the websites and get access to those.
So on your Constitution course, you said that's free now?
The physical product is not. However, you can take it online right there. I can see you're on the website. If you scroll up just a little bit, there'll be 3 little blocks. And one of them is right there, those blue blocks. The middle one is how you can take that course. We send you 1 lesson at a time. And once you get through all 12, we'll send you a graduation certificate. But again, all of that is digital, so you don't get to hold it, smell it, and all of that. I'm an old school guy. I like books and DVDs, but if you're an online person, that's a great way to get access. We're looking to have an informed electorate for 2020. And so this is part of our push, and part of our supporters have agreed to subsidize this and make it available to you, the public.
And how extensive is the course? How long would it take the average person to go through it?
So each of the videos that we share are 20 minutes long. So we have a number of churches across the country that will actually teach this course as a Bible study on Sunday mornings or maybe Wednesday evenings, or a small group. There's Kiwanis clubs, there's Tea Party groups, Republican men and women's groups that take it. I don't know of any Democratic groups that have taken it yet, but we'll keep praying for that. I'm still waiting to be asked to present there. But you watch a 20-minute video, you can work through the homework in probably another 25, 30 minutes. Usually it's additional reading or video assignments. And then we have a test and a quiz. So I generally tell people you invest about 90 minutes in each lecture, and then there's 12 lectures. You can take longer because we have a kind of an honors class, if you will, where you can get into a little bit deeper in the topics, and we offer those resources. But if you want to just burn through it, you could probably take about 1 hour per lecture. Again, there's 12 lectures, 20 minutes of which you'll watch a video of myself and Michael Perutka.
And, folks, this is vitally important, especially today when things are so confusing and we have so much disinformation and misinformation out there. If you ask the average American, they probably would say that the United States is a democracy. The illiteracy of the Constitution and God's Word. That's why we are sitting here with Roe v. Wade for almost 50 years. That's why we had the Obergefell decision. Courts don't make laws, and yet we've allowed this to go on. So, and even what we're looking at today with the ongoing Donald Trump impeachment fiasco. What are your thoughts on that? I read your article today, Jake. That was very good.
Yeah, well, we wanted to comment on that because, I mean, first of all, obstruction of Congress. It's, in some regards, it's the constitutional duty of the president to obstruct Congress. And by that, what I simply mean is there's checks and balances. So that's why the president was given veto power, for example. And I highlight some of these things, but both of the two charges are absolutely ludicrous. None of them are criminal in nature. Therefore, they don't have the authority of the Constitution with regards to impeachment. So I think I'm right in line with the president when he says, by all means, guys, if you want to do this and show the United States of America how foolish you are, let's have an impeachment and now let's have a trial. So we can fully dive in, just in case people didn't think the other side was insane enough. This is going to prove exactly what it's about. And I value and appreciate the courage of our president to take this stuff head on. I think for too long, especially as a Christian, I know that Christians, we generally have the attitude of passivity. We turn the other cheek. And while that is redemptive, suffering can be very redemptive. We also need to be assertive and bold with the truth. And if we're not assertive and bold with the truth, then the truth just kind of gets squashed, trampled over, and then we're kind of fools for our pains. You mentioned about our courts. This is a topic that I talk about extensively in my travels, and I'm traveling quite a bit throughout the United States. By the way, all 50 states, we have graduates of our Constitution course. So there's people all over the country that are constitutionally educated. Many of them have run for local office, state office, even federal office, and have successfully won, that have been educated with our courses. And that to me is tremendously encouraging. But while, for example, I'm speaking in schools, I often get the opportunity to speak in private schools and just as often in public schools, believe it or not, for a civics class, a history class. And I speak about courts. But first, I talk about life because the fundamental right to life is recognized and was recognized by our founders and codified in our founding documents. We have the right to life, liberty, and property. It says in the Declaration of Independence. It also says it in the Fifth Amendment to the Bill of Rights. No person can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without breaking the law. And so I ask the students, and I'll ask the viewers today, how many of you believe that we are born equal? I'm just going to pause for a second. Listen to my question. Are we born equal? Most people raise their hand. I thought that growing up. Of course we're born equal. What are you, nuts, Jake? Men are born equal to women, people of color, not people of color, and so on. But we're actually incorrect. That's a flawed way of thinking. The Declaration of Independence describes that we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are, finish the sentence, created. They're not born. At what point, then, I ask my audience, generally students in this case, at what point is a person created? Inside of the womb or outside of the womb? And quickly they surmise that the answer is, or they deduce rather, that you are created inside of the womb. Okay, so if we're created equal with the right to life, liberty, and property, then what does that mean for death in the womb or murder in the womb? Is that a crime? Has the child committed a crime? No. Then I say it's unconstitutional. I just read you the document. And they'll say, but Jake, the courts have said that it's okay, it's legal. And I quickly remind them, courts don't make laws. The first sentence of the Constitution after the preamble, the very first sentence says that Congress, a bicameral legislature, that is where the legislative authority is found. All legislative authority is found in a bicameral legislature. So Congress is the one that makes the laws, not the courts. The courts can be easily understood as referees in your favorite sporting event. If your favorite team is winning 50-0 at halftime, for example, of the Super Bowl, it's coming up here, so I'm sure it's close to many people's hearts. And the referees come out at halftime and they say, listen, halftime is over, but we're changing the rules for the second half of this game. We're only going to give, we use the 49ers, we're only going to give them 2 downs. And we're going to give the opposing team, the Kansas City Chiefs, we're going to give them 10 downs to convert to a first down. Now, if the Chiefs are losing 50-0 at halftime, you can tell you change the rules that drastically, it's probably going to change the outcome of the game. But there is no American person, no football fan, no football stadium, no audience, and no team that would allow referees to change the rules. Why? Because referees don't make the rules. Their job is simply to apply those rules to both parties in front of them fairly. And then I asked the question, if a ref makes a bad call in a game on Sunday, does that affect next Sunday's game? No. It's a bad call. It's considered such. We learn from that call and we don't make that mistake again. So this precedent idea of courts who have made phony or bad rulings or opinions, that's what it says at the top of their briefs, it's an opinion. If they make a bad one, we don't continue and keep that the new rule. That would be foolish or nonsense. No more than we would take a bad call in one game and apply it to the next game. No more listening to courts with legislative authority. There's no room for that. We wouldn't do that again in our favorite sports competition. We shouldn't do it with the most valuable, cherished possession that we have, and that is our right to life, liberty, and property.
Well said, Jake. And maybe you could take us through just some of the basics. I know there's way more than we can squeeze in here to an hour.
Yeah.
But what was the original intent of the framers of the Constitution?
Well, one of the things that we express everywhere I go, it's called the American view of law and government. There's a lot of views of law and government. There's many of them. As a matter of fact, you can travel the world and no two views will be the same, generally speaking. One of the things too I'd like to side note point is there have been other people that have started governments and have copied our Constitution word for word, but they've not been successful. And that's due to the morality of the people. John Adams said our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the government of any other. If a nation of people does not have self-government, there is no government that is capable of governing the self. And by that, I mean the individual. If they are immoral, then more force is needed. And of course, that results in tyranny. But the American view that our founders had, that we have and that we teach at Institute on the Constitution is number one, there is a God. In the Declaration, it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created. That description of being created, we are a creation of a creator, which denotes there is a God. And it also finds its roots in the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 27. God created man and woman. He created Adam and Eve. In his own image created he them. So this concept of us being created goes back to Genesis 1. And then it says in the Declaration of Independence that our Creator has endowed us with unalienable rights. So we believe, number two, in the American view of law and government, number one, there's a God. Number two, our rights come from him. And life, liberty, and property are found in Genesis chapter 1 when God says, be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. That was when man was given the right to liberty from God, not from his parents, not from government. Of course, there's certain strictures in parenting. But then lastly, we have property as well, the right to life, liberty, and property. Property came when God said, take dominion and subdue the land. That right to property was given by God for us to steward this land on his behalf. So there is a God. Our rights come from him. And it says in the Declaration of Independence, to secure these rights, these God-given rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So what is the purpose of civil government? It says right in the Declaration of Independence, to secure your God-given rights. It's not to give you anything. Government doesn't own anything. If it gives you something, then it had to have stolen it from somebody else. The only purpose of government is to protect your right to life, to liberty, to property, so you can produce and you can maintain community, and we can continue to, in the eyes of our founders and our pilgrim forebears, glorify God and advance the Christian religion all across the globe.
Yeah, there are those today who believe that God's word is fluid, changeable, and they believe the same thing about our Constitution, our founding documents. But if you go along with that reasoning, you kind of destroy the foundations of everything that we've built this country on. And as we read in Psalm 11:3, if the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? So what are your thoughts on that, Jake? In fact, there's even a movement out there for calling for a constitutional convention to maybe change a few things. So is the Constitution our foundation?
Well, I would say, just as, the two parallel each other so well. Christianity, our Christian faith, the Bible, it's God's absolute truth. It's unchangeable. I'm the Lord your God, I change not. So let's take that similar approach to the Constitution now. One thing I am not saying is that the Constitution is the Bible. The Constitution is a document written by men. Therefore, it's a flawed document and needs to be amended from time to time. And it's written by flawed men. The Bible is written by an unflawed, perfect, omniscient, omnipresent God. So I'm not going to make the correlation that the Constitution has any saving power, or our founding fathers were Jesus in any way, or claim they had any type of deity. We need to square everything in the Constitution and our founding fathers with the Word of God. But having said that, this changing view of truth that you're speaking of, one of the analogies that I'll use when I'm speaking to groups is, I personally, we've been on an Avengers kick here in America, the Avengers and superheroes and Marvel comics. And, just as a side note, I've done a little study on this. If you take any of these superheroes, you can see how their powers are somehow associated back with the divine powers that are found in the Bible to one of the biblical characters. So it's really just a copying of that. But speaking to this, I want the right to fly. And I'll ask the room, do you want the right to fly? I mean, think about how amazing it would be to fly like Superman. But what is stopping us from flying? And everybody will naturally spit out, well, the law of gravity. So there is a law. It's a fixed law. It's a fixed standard. It's a truth. We can all identify it. Gravity, well, I think gravity is discriminatory. It hates women. So it's very sexist. It doesn't let women fly. It's racist. It doesn't let people of color fly. It's bigoted. It doesn't let Muslims fly. It's homophobic. It won't let
I'd be
homosexuals
happy,
fly.
Jake, I'd be happy just with a flying car. They promised us that back in the 70s. I still don't have one.
Right. Now, not to get too complex on this, because some people do, but I am going to just run for Congress. I want you to have the right to fly. I think gravity is a horrible law. It's very discriminatory. As I said, I made my case. It doesn't let anybody fly that's worth anything. And so we in Congress passed a bill. It's 10 feet high in documents and papers. We haven't figured it all out, but we're going to pass it, and then we're going to look into the rest of it and see how we can do it, because that seems to be the trend up there on Capitol Hill. The president signs this new bill into law that makes gravity illegal because he wants to beat the Russians to be the first not only to the moon, but also to have your citizens fly. Now, the Supreme Court takes the view that many people do, that truth, law, God's law is fixed law, the laws of nature and nature's God is changing, it's evolving, and we are evolving as people. So maybe we've evolved to the point where it's time to fly. And the people seem to want it. If we were to take a vote right now, a majority of people want to fly. So they slam the gavel down and they give us now the right to fly. They've made gravity illegal. So I'll ask the room, what's going to happen tomorrow when we get on top of the building, we jump off? Everybody says, well, you're going to die. You're going to follow the ground and die. And I'll say, what are you talking about? Why would we do that? And they would say, well, because there's still gravity. And I said, well, stop. Congress said that gravity is discriminatory. It's horrible. They made gravity now illegal. See, there's fixed truths and fixed standards that absolutely unequivocally cannot change, and those are the truths. That was the supposition that our founders declared independence. They were entitled to this independence by the laws of nature and nature's God, certain fixed fundamental standards. But now you've seen this changing view of truth and it started, back. Jean-Jacques Rousseau used to speak of it, the truth. He rejected the concept of sin. He stressed the goodness of man. He blamed human institutions for the existence of evil. And then as he goes on, you have like Friedrich Hegel, and then you go down to Auguste Comte, And then you get into Charles Darwin, where he talks about the physical mutation and evolution. Well, this is what bled into our legal thinking, and it was called the rise of legal positivism. And we speak about this in our lecture 11 of our Constitution course. Christopher Columbus Langdell was the dean of Harvard Law School, and he introduced this concept, or I should say he popularized it. He, in 1870s, when he came there, two of his notable disciples, by the way, were Roscoe Pound and Oliver Wendell Holmes. But with this, it said that there was no divine absolutes in law, or if they were, they're irrelevant to the modern legal system. Law is simply man-made, so whatever the state says becomes the law, and law evolves as man evolves. So as that law evolves, who's in charge of this evolution? Who's in charge of guiding it so it doesn't get so far off the rails that we say gravity can be illegal? Well, the judges. So we pull up the newscasts, we throw up the broadcasting, and we say to, we turn on the viewers, what is the Supreme Court going to say? What is the Oracle going to say? How are they going to change reality today? That all started back in the 1870s. And so as a result of that, we have this living constitution view. Again, the word living constitution does not exist in the Constitution anywhere. The fact that it is a living view, the way that the courts describe it, is extremely dangerous. Because the bottom line is nothing can stop the consequences of breaking God's law, which would be his word, or the laws of nature, or any law that God has created. Nothing can stop it. So we may enforce it. We may enforce the opposite of it with a gun. We may use a pen and spill ink on paper and have the force of Congress. But the bottom line is we're still going to face the consequence and the ramification of it. Therefore, it is unwise to do anything that does not square with that law of God. And so we talked about what are the dangers of it. And I know you have a very informed audience. The dangers of jettisoning ourselves from that standard, that biblical standard that God laid, is that it only hurts us. And it hurts him because we are his creation, but it doesn't affect him. It doesn't impact him. And the only ones that truly suffer are the ones, if you take this view of government, it's called a pagan view of government. It gets rid of God, so it puts government as divine at the top. And when government is God, they have unlimited authority. And when they have unlimited authority, it produces state worship. You look to them for permission for everything, from cradle to grave, they cover you. Well, anything you worship other than God is going to tyrannize you. And this is based off of this evolutionary system where there is a serving class, there is a ruling class, there is the elites and the intellectuals, and there's us dumb working class, similar to the Matrix, where we're all just hooked up in incubators and we become batteries for the powers that be. That pagan view is in the Bible with Nebuchadnezzar and Pharaoh. It existed with Caesar. And it's gone into American thinking, where now we look to the government for our rights. And it just grieves me because I have the opportunity to speak in not only to adults in churches, but to schools. And that is literally what students think. Who should be responsible for your housing? Well, the government takes care of that. Who should be responsible for your healthcare? Well, the government takes care of that. Sure, they will. Who should be responsible for your education? Well, again, the government is always that answer. And that's a tragedy. And it's something that I insist upon teaching against, because the fact is that the document exists that contradicts it. It's called our Constitution.
I'm just looking at your notes here, and I wonder if you can mention some of the, you've got here, radical offshoots of legal positivism. Mm-hmm. Those are interesting.
So what ended up happening is, of course, you have this teaching with Christopher Columbus, Langdell, and this living constitution. Well, as with anything, and I think the Democrats are learning that right now. And again, I'm not playing the party line here. Republicans certainly have done their share of destroying our Constitution, just with a different mask on, I guess you could say. And I'm not even certain how savvy this president is to the Constitution. I would love for him to take our course. Again, I appreciate his boldness and conviction, but some of the things that he has done have been unconstitutional, because I don't think he's clued into what that exactly means. But thankfully, at least he uses common sense. But some of these radical offshoots that existed afterwards, you take a concept, for instance, like taking care of the poor, and then you make it a government concept, and then you get the radicals that infiltrate that want to take it to a whole new level. For example, Bill Clinton was pretty much a conservative while he was a president. He was a liberal of that time. But now what the left is attempting to do in government makes him blush for what he stood for. I mean, you would think he was standing on a Republican platform during his presidency compared to what we have now on the opposite end. One of the radical offshoots is legal realism. This argues, again, you'll hear how they take it to a whole new level. They take a simple concept like, hey, people are evolving, law should evolve, we should do this slowly, there's different kinds of laws that exist out there. Legal realism argues that since there's no divine absolutes or natural law, and none of these principles exist, that the legal system should stop pretending to be neutral and objective, and instead just openly work to advance the cause of the clients it favors. So now you would have partisan politics. I feel like you're going to chime in on me.
Oh, we're absolutely seeing that today, aren't we?
Absolutely.
I mean, we're seeing things I never thought we would see in my lifetime.
Right.
Especially when it comes to transgenderism and the entire homosexual issue, and drag queen story time in libraries, not to mention the banning, the laws that are being made now, banning even counseling people who want to get out of that lifestyle.
That's right.
Most cities probably, that's against the law.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and you even see it where the state would like to sanction that. And of course, California, the left coast over there, generally is the spear tip for a lot of this nonsense. But there was the critical legal studies movement, which is often Marxist. So again, they're looking for a chink in our armor. They're looking for Americans to say, and I had a friend of mine who is actually a family member, love her dearly. She said, you speak of the Constitution like you do of the Bible, like you just can't go outside of it. Like it's what you have to stick to. And that is what people are taught. Well, it's no longer good, so we can just ignore it. No, you have to amend it. A judge's decision doesn't change it. Even Congress coming out with a statute that's contrary to the Constitution does not make what they say constitutional. And in that critical legal studies movement, it argued that the legal system be openly partial. So you might as well just be openly partial to the poor and oppressed. And we should openly work against the rich and the religious establishment. Well, who determines who's poor? Who determines who's oppressed? What are the standards there that we can agree on? And again, who is the arbiter of this? Well, it leaves it all back down to the courts. And tragically, we as people are so busy in our lives, and we've got so much going on, that we would rather talk about what the court said than try to influence what our culture does or says, or those local leaders that have a lot of authority to keep state and federal legislation out of their counties. And that's what I'd like to encourage everybody to do, is first get educated, and secondly, work on your local level. It is a struggle. It is tough. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. We're in a fallen world, and it's not going to get better. We fall. We're fallen creation, but God's light goes a long way, and it throws a long distance. So I want to encourage you that with your abilities that God has placed in you, He has a call and He has a purpose for you to take those abilities and shine that light. Because there has never been, ever in the history of mankind, it's scientifically impossible for darkness to put out light. Darkness can't do that. Light is its repellent. Darkness is just an opposite of it. So I encourage you to stand with that light.
Your chart there that you have within this lecture, number 11, is very interesting. That shows the federal debt and the debt per person. Tell us about that, Jake.
So
that's just overwhelming.
It is. And one of the concepts that we use, okay, you got the chart there. Fantastic. Thank you. So as you can see on this chart, we have a heavily bloated government. You can see the federal debt in 1832 was $11 million. 2015, this was 2015, so forgive me for the figures, it was 17 trillion. Of course, that is growing and increasing at a rapid level, and not even this president has scaled that back. Well, I shouldn't say that he hasn't scaled it back, he has, but it still continues to grow. This debt per person used to be $1.30. So if everybody in the country would, everybody that was an adult would whip out $1.30 out of their billfold, we could have paid that debt off. But now we all have to put in $53,000. Most people don't even make that in a year. So to pay off this debt is virtually impossible. But why does that debt exist? Well, when you see this living approach taking root in a country, the government just continues to get bigger and it invades more. Most state agencies in the 50 states that we have, not 57, 50, in the 50 states we have, most state agencies, you have a federal agency doing the same thing within the state. So there's multiple redundancies. The federal government is not efficient. Just look at the United States Post Office. I love the workers at the post office. They're fantastic. I have family members that have worked in it. That's not the problem. The problem is when we start to do what we don't have the authority to do, we can never do it right. It can never be good. But through all sorts of strained interpretations of things like the general welfare clause, I know y'all have heard of that. That does not say specific welfare. It says general. How does it impact? Sorry about that. I should have put it on airplane mode. I had a call chime in there. You have the welfare clause. You also have the interstate commerce clause, which the courts have read into the Constitution, something that allows them to come in and entangle themselves within states, within state issues with each other. Then you also have, for example, the contract clause. The federal government never used to be allowed to get involved with independent or private contracts. Now they do on a regular basis. There's the due process clause, and there's many other clauses. But anyways, it's opened the doors to get government involved in more things. If government is going to be involved in more things, it has to employ more people. If it employs more people, then it has to come up with more resources to do it. So then it has to create unconstitutional ways by way to tax the individual. Just a little FYI for those of you that didn't know, the federal taxing power did exist under the Constitution, but it says that there's no capitation tax. And you all have heard of the concept of being decapitated. It's when your head comes off. So this capitation tax, what it simply meant was you cannot tax the individual. You cannot tax us individually. The federal government had no jurisdiction over the individual person. The states had that jurisdiction and that authority. So therefore, the federal government would come to the states and say, hey, listen, according to the population, the census, your state owes this much to the treasury. You go figure out how you want to get it from your people. But again, through various strained interpretations and mostly voluntarily, we gave a lot of authority back to the IRS. And now we are each individually paying those taxes. And that's unconstitutional. Now, I'm not saying, hey, stop paying your taxes, don't do this, don't do that. You need to get educated with how you do it. But that's just another example of how now the federal government has direct access into your pocket, whereas before the state government would stop that, it would interpose. And the state would work with you, the individual citizens of your state, to figure out how to raise that revenue. So as this revenue is being raised, we can't even come close to raising it at the rate to even pay off the interest of this federal debt. And so we're in a real problem. The borrower is slave to the lender. And again, this concept, it doesn't even touch children. It doesn't even touch them in economics. I was just speaking at a college not too long ago in Florida. I said, how do y'all like the concept of free college? What if we gave you your degree with no cost out of your pocket? Every kid raised their hand and got excited about it, not even thinking through the ramifications of it. And I said, that's fine, we can do that. But 10 years from now, you are going to have to pay off the next generation's college education. And I can promise you, it's going to cost about twice as much. How can we pull this off? Well, none of them thought it was a good idea any longer. So as you look at those graphs, I think that just shows we have become more, not necessarily liberal, but we've taken liberties to ignore the Constitution when it's inconvenient for us at that particular moment. And as a result, you can see what happens. Government gets bigger, gets more out of control, gets more out of touch with us, the individual. But this, again, is because we haven't remained vigilant and required accountability from those that we send to DC with our suffrage, with our votes.
And, you know, a lot of our, I would venture to guess that most of our states are ignoring their state constitutions, just like we're ignoring the federal constitution as well. So,
Right.
so what's the answer there, Jake? Do you think we're headed toward another American Revolution or Civil War? What's on the horizon? Because things are really getting out of control.
Well, I think wars are fought differently now in regards to internally. We have been and continue to be, and the driving force behind that, of course, is media. And media likes to polarize, and it works for them. I'm not even saying it's overall a conspiracy here. What the media does is if it bleeds, it leads. And so pitting us against each other, I think, is the most foolish thing. I'm a Christian. I'm also a minister. I'm a preacher. I speak in churches all throughout the country. My Christianity is the biggest unifying factor that I have. First of all, it united me with my Savior, with my Creator, which has brought me to a position of now I will receive eternal life after this life. So it united me back to my Creator. It set me back into equilibrium, if you will. And Christianity will do the same thing in our culture. It's the only answer. We can have a constitutional convention. We can create more amendments to this Constitution, and we can make these great amendments. We can have our lawyers look at them and say, man, these are bulletproof. But the bottom line is our Constitution is already being ignored. More amendments is not going to make it less ignored. It's the heart of the people that matters, our morality. If we accept the fact that, for example, as a Christian people, that sin is okay, that pornography is okay, that adultery is okay, then pretty soon now it gets into gross sexual, heinous sexual sins like pedophilia or child trafficking and so on. The radical side of the sin nature knows no bounds. No different. The radical side of the government nature that has become parasitical upon the people and now has no restraint. It can take as much as it wants from us. It's going to continue to bloat and grow. So as a Christian, what we do, we bring salt, we bring light to the earth. And how does that do? We eat ourselves. Every person that I speak to, and again, I'm going to go to a public school setting that I had not too long ago. It was in a school in Nebraska. Before I began that class, students came in and it was a big GLBT movement. Now, most people in the Christian camp, like, oh, GLBT, they're the worst Satan. I'm sorry, they're not. They're just a byproduct of the culture. They're sinners in need of salvation, in need of grace. Yes, the GLBT movement is very nefarious. I do agree with that, but they're just being used as well. These homosexual students came into the classroom, and I was a little worried because I do talk about God. I speak about the Declaration of Independence. I talk about our Creator, the source of law, and how God is that source, and that I am a minister, and so on. And after the end of the presentation, when I talked about individual value and God-given rights and the security that you have if you don't look to government for those rights, if rather you look to your Creator, it produced a unifying principle. Those principles produced unity in the classroom. And all the students, no matter what their religious persuasion was, no matter what their any persuasion, let's put it that way, because it's getting kind of nuts out there, they all agreed fundamentally that yes, we as people seem to get the short end of the stick. Government, no matter what party it is, they hold the power. It seems like they're wagging the dog. And so coming back to the Constitution gives us a common ground, a common platform where individual liberty can be celebrated, but at the same time, it's tempered with the morality that God offers. God is our Creator again. There is a God. Our rights come from Him. And the purpose of civil government is to secure God-given rights. That's what the Declaration of Independence says. So a good example of this, God's law, and the unifying force of it that I'll use is if you consider that your rights are the most sacred thing that you have, you were created with them, your Creator gave them to you. The way that He created a protection for those rights is He created law. So I show a picture of a city with a wall around it. The wall would be the defensive mechanism we would call the law. The city would be your rights. It's what we're trying to guard and protect. That law is the law of nature, and nature is God. It's that fixed, immutable standard. It says you have the right to life. I'm going to create a law that says thou shalt not kill. You have the right to property. God created a law that says thou shalt not steal. You have the right to liberty, to freedom, without incarceration or taking away of that liberty by government. That's why God said, thou shalt not perjure, you shall not bear false witness, so that you can't forfeit your liberty unjustly. So God created these laws as a mechanism to protect a defense. And then I just kind of erase part of the wall and I say, where is your insecurity of your rights now? If the city's in the middle, the wall's on the outside, and we get rid of a chunk of that wall, where do the enemies of your liberty come through? And they say, well, right where you eliminated that portion of the wall. And I said, when we take down God's law, we create an insecure environment for our rights. And so all these concepts and these analogies make sense. We offer a free podcast every week on YouTube. It's The American View on YouTube, where myself and my 17-year-old son, Dominic, will go. I usually go to the headlines on Monday. That's about the only day I get into the media because it's so depressing. And I take a common topic. This week it happens to be the impeachment of President Donald Trump there. I encourage you to click follow, and we'll send you guys out links every week. These are free, and they're 3-minute exposés on the Bible and the Constitution. And what we're doing is we're giving an exposition of, okay, this is what's happening in culture today. What does the Bible say about it? What does the Constitution say about it? What was the founders' biblical American view of this concept? And are we following it? And if we're not, then let's educate ourselves so that we can. I want to do that for you, the listeners here, Rob. I appreciate the time that you've given me today, and I want that to be the takeaway. Let's continue to learn. Let's get excited about it. Liberty is amazing. Once lost, it's nearly impossible to regain in a country and a culture that we have right now, where its roots and its foundation are biblical. I'm excited that I can work towards that end.
What are you finding, Jake, when you go to the public schools and even some of the private schools? Are they offering good courses on history and civics? Is that still something that's happening, or are they rewriting history in the textbooks?
Well, I think
What
that
do kids know, and what do they not?
Sure. I would say that most kids, most of the schools that I've gone to, they memorize the preamble, which I'm glad. It doesn't really seem like they have an understanding of the concepts of it. It seems, though, that after that, once you learn the preamble, then you talk about the 3 branches of government, and then you talk about the Supreme Court and what they've said recently. So most kids are operating in the paradigm that exists today, rather than going to the founders' biblical view and operating or applying at least that paradigm to the culture today. That's what we do in our Constitution course. Many Constitution courses don't, though. They pay lip service to the old school documents, and then they talk about, but this is reality today. This is what's going on today. We don't do that. We do show, because after you learn how it's supposed to be, which you do for the first 10 lessons of our lecture series, in the 11th, people always ask, how in the world did we get to where we're at now? If this is how it's supposed to be, what in the world are we doing here? And that's where we walk through these concepts and a lot of what we talked about today on the radio or on the video. Man, what is this anymore? I don't know what to call it. But then we also go, where does the restoration come? So young people, old people, when you hear truth, you know it. It resounds with you. You were created by the Creator, who is the truth. Jesus said, I am the truth. All those that hear truth, all those that follow me hear my truth. So people inherently know inside there's this innate desire to hear truth and a knowing of truth. As you formulate that, I guess you could say, as you speak that, as you stand for that, I have found that almost every situation where I've been in an education setting, from time to time, there's two to three students that may disagree. Most of the time it will be a teacher. But if I was to put a percentage of how many teachers have stopped my presentation, none have. And most of them are shocked. Many of them are actually biblically thinking people, constitutionally minded people. But tragically, they don't feel that they can assert those realities. And I think it's because they're not educated to the way that they can. And so it's important, like the Bible says, to be harmless as doves, but wise as serpents, innocent as doves, and wise as serpents. Our materials that we use are pretty turnkey, and they will pass any government school muster because they're reality, they're facts, and they're historical. That is all on our side, and it's not too difficult to present that. And the worst you can get is if you get on a CNN interview or something like that, you're going to educate a whole bunch of people. I don't know how many minds you'll change, but those that are in our schools, it's imperative that we reach them, and that's why we do this. We have a new homeschool curriculum that's been published now. It's 18 lectures. If your students are homeschooling on this podcast that we're doing, I would love to get you our course of study. It's under $100. You can get the lectures, the DVDs. It's self-taught. It's not complicated. You don't have to teach it. We do the teaching, and your student gets credit, and they're going to need a government course anyhow. And we have sold hundreds of these courses throughout the past 3 years. And I would love it for your young person to take it. I would love it for if you teach a Bible study in your church, to take these courses. Take them and teach them. If you're a pastor, I'd love to come share at your church and start one of these courses. This is the work that we do, and it's essential.
Tell us again how people would go about getting those.
So if you go to that website, Institute on the Constitution, right there, you can click on the links that are just below where I'm doing the video. That's just an overview. And we will get in contact with you immediately. If you are interested in the courses, you can see the pictures there. When you click on it, it will give you descriptions. You can also reach out and touch us. We've got an 800 number, so you're free to toll free call us at any time. If you want to have us come do events in your area, I would be happy to do that. As you mentioned before, we'll be coming to your event there in Wisconsin, and looking forward to that, brother. Looking forward to finally being with you and sharing liberty.
Yeah, you've been writing for us for a few years, and we've been hoping to have you come up for the conference. So we finally have you lined up. So, do you do a lot of speaking in churches, or are your venues primarily schools? And
We do.
What age group are you kind of hitting there?
So I get asked to do everything from elementary on through high school. Most of my audiences, when it comes to school age kids, are going to be middle school to high school because the subject matter is a little more relevant to those ages. But I teach the principles to elementary schools. Generally, when I leave, I'll give you an example. We just came back from the state of Washington. We were on the Spokane side, and we went to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. We spoke in 2 churches. We spoke to 2 schools. One was a homeschool co-op, so it was a gathering of quite a few homeschool parents and students. Then we spoke to 2 Patriot groups, and we also did a John Birch live interview in the studio. So we'll do radio interviews, television interviews while we're there. Last time I went to Indiana, I was on the morning news, the Fox News station. We did a Bill of Rights celebration day where we gave awards to students who wrote essays on the Bill of Rights. I literally speak in so many different settings and venues, from people's barns where we can see our breath all the way into real cushy, nice mega churches. And everything in between. My heart is just to make sure that the message gets out. And that's what God's called me to do. So I'm trying to be faithful.
And if people would like to have you come and speak in person, how do they go about doing that?
So you can, on the website, obviously there's a contact button. We do not withhold our 800 number. So you can get a hold of us through that. Otherwise, you can email me personally if you'd like. It's jake@theamericanview.com. So again, we're teaching the American View, theamericanview.com, and just put Jake at in the beginning of it. And I would love to join you, or at least talk about how we might set up an event or a handful of events in your area.
So are you also pastoring a church now as well?
I am not. I wouldn't consider myself a pastor. I am a minister, but I am definitely more evangelical. So I'd be more of an evangelist. I like to travel. I like to move.
Okay, good. And you're out of Maryland. I think originally from Minnesota, though, right?
That is correct. The land of 10,000 lakes.
Well, we have more in Wisconsin, but we don't get credit for them.
I'm not giving any either. And I apologize. My battery's about to run off on my last earbud, so I got to close it up.
That's okay, Jake. I appreciate it.
You got it.
So, folks, you can come and meet Jake in person March 13th and 14th in Marshfield, Wisconsin for our annual Ministry Expo and Conference. And again, his website is is it the Institute on the Constitution? Institute on the Constitution or theamericanview.com for more information from Jake. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Jake. Okay, folks, next week we will have Bradley Dean here from Sons of Liberty, Sons of Liberty Media, Sons of Liberty Radio. And the following week we will have Sheriff Joe Arpaio from Arizona joining us. So that is it for today, and we will see you next time.